Hi, welcome to my channel where occasionally I post extended video essays and rants. Today I want to talk about the Blake Lively vs. Justin Baldoni internet drama that's going on. I thought for a long time about how to approach this discussion, and it was so difficult because every time I thought about the situation, I just kept getting more and more upset. I don't want this to become an in defense of Blake Lively video because I think the topics I want to touch on go so far beyond that one person. But I do think that this entire situation is really an example of how misogyny is so pervasive and easy to weaponize. We are all susceptible to propaganda, and rather than trying to deny that reality, I think everyone needs to take a step back to recontextualize what we were seeing during the It Ends With Us promotional campaign this summer, now that Blake Lively has filed a complaint against Justin Baldoni recently, only 4 months later. First, I want to summarize the current situation because I think a lot of people are getting lost in the details and missing the key points of this claim. On December 21st, Blake Lively filed a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department against Justin Baldoni, Wayfair Productions, the production company he co-founded with Steven Sarowitz, CEO Jamie Heath, and Baldoni's publicist Jennifer Abel and PR manager Melissa Nathan. This is a necessary step in the California court process before filing an actual lawsuit. In the complaint, she outlines multiple instances of harassment during the time of production of the movie, including those sexual in nature, by Baldoni and Heath. According to the complaint, however, efforts were made to stop that harassment with an all-hands meeting attended by Lively, Baldoni, Heath, Sony representatives, and Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds. At this meeting, Baldoni and Heath agreed to cease all such behavior, outlined on a listed document, by the way, in order to proceed with production of the movie. They signed their names to that, and that's why I choose to believe her. According to the complaint, they complied with her demands, and production on the movie went forward successfully. If things ended there, though, there would be no claim being filed. One of the items on the list of 30 demands, however, included a promise of no retaliation for speaking up against this harassment. Alongside promotion of the movie, Blake Lively alleges that a social media smear campaign was carried out to ruin her reputation and discredit her out of fear that she would reveal the alleged harassment that took place behind the scenes. So, for those who are mischaracterizing this case as one where she's simply blaming Baldoni for ruining her reputation, that's a very narrow view of things. In fact, amplifying stories of her quote-unquote bad behavior in order to ruin her image and improve his own may be fair game and totally legal. What is illegal, however, is doing so in order to retaliate against her for speaking out about harassment. And that's why it's important to take her claims seriously and investigate. I've seen so many skeptical comments, and presuming they're not just bots, this is only half a joke given the circumstances, I want to tackle each point that has been brought up as a reason to distrust the claims made in the report. Before we begin, I think it's important that everyone objectively assesses their personal response to this breaking news. Did you immediately choose to distrust Blake Lively's words because of your opinion of her? Did you read the full claim before reaching a conclusion? Did you take any time to consider how all that evidence of her out-of-touch, quote-unquote mean girl behavior reached your ears in the first place? Were you actively looking up information about Blake Lively because you were a fan, or were you just taking in that information without any effort on your part? Let's start with the criticisms most frequently made about her during the promotional period and whether or not it has any relevance to this case at all. Number 1, she is a quote-unquote mean girl who treats others with disdain and rudeness. I actually really hate that label, mean girl, because I feel like it's so mercurial and can be applied to any woman we don't like and want to apply a catty or petty label to. We read whatever we want to into their behavior and attribute it to stereotypes of attractive but cruel women. It's kind of insulting and very much gendered and misogynistic. But sure, you can have your opinion about her and her manners. I do recognize that there were moments in which she has appeared rude on camera. However, I think trying to judge whether someone's claims of having suffered abuse are valid based on whether or not they are polite or rude is not it. Please reassess how much you value manners over women's safety. Number 2, she is controlling and manipulative. She tried to take control over the production of the movie. Now this one is interesting because I think now that we are given context in the allegations of what was going on during the production of It Ends With Us, we can see how it is easy to spin a narrative about a woman being controlling when she is trying to get a handle on a bad situation. Considering what she alleges was happening on set, was it too controlling to try to rein in the repeated misconduct of the two men harassing the cast and crew? With the central scene she alleges Baldoni tried to add to the script and film, does it surprise anyone she might have pushed for a different edit of the movie? And number 3, her attitude during the promotion of the film was out of touch. Granted, to be honest, I totally agree. But I also see now that Sony gave directives to promote the movie with that attitude. Given that women who don't comply in the workplace are often labeled as difficult to work with, it's not surprising to me that she didn't veer from doing her job as directed. Did she go too far with her pushing her personal products? Perhaps. That's really up to personal opinion. But it also isn't really relevant to the veracity of her claims of sexual harassment or retaliation. Considering how many others followed those same directives, attended the same interviews and events, and then think about why she was the only one who took the majority of the heat for it. I want to remind everyone that the perfect victim doesn't exist. All of this reminds me of cases of sexual assault against women that are fought in court by lawyers who dig up their past sexual histories, claim they were drunk, accuse them of having seduced the men who assaulted them, etc. It just sounds like victim blaming. For those whose first response to all of this was, well, I think she's a mean girl, I think you're missing the point completely. A person that you dislike for perfectly valid reasons can still be a victim of harassment and retaliation. And believe me, there are valid reasons to dislike her. I heard about the plantation wedding too. I heard about the antebellum storefront. I get it. But do you dislike her so much for those things that you think she deserves to be harassed and retaliated against for speaking up against it? If that's not the case and you're just uncertain about trusting her, are the questions that you're raising about whether or not to believe her, for example, why did she wait until now? Why didn't she just leave? What about her power in the role of producer? Are you satisfied with just asking those questions in order to justify your dismissal of her claim? Or did you make any effort to find the answers? Because I considered those questions in the new context we've been given, and I think those questions can all be answered. Let's get into it. What if Blake is making everything up to save her reputation? I see this question brought up a lot. Sexual harassment and assault are not things women commonly make up, if only because it is humiliating and the public reaction is often exactly this: disbelief. More people will choose to question if that's what really happened than not, even when there are witnesses. So if you are genuinely wondering if she made it up, I urge you to read the claim and look at what has already been presented as evidence. The list that Baldoni and Heath had to agree to in order to resume filming is incredibly specific, and it's an official document. The text messages are also real, and even Jennifer Abel, in her own self-defense, did not deny their existence. She only claimed they were cherry-picked and did not insinuate the plan to quote-unquote bury Lively was carried out. However, I believe that it's pretty obvious from multiple texts that they were gloating over actions that were carried out. I believe the statement made by Abel depends on people having not read the messages to smooth over how condemning they actually are. Second, Blake has the power of a producer. She's also an A-list celebrity, or at least is married to one. Why didn't she or her husband put a stop to all of this? First of all, Blake only got a producer credit after the filming was done and her cut of the movie was chosen for the final release. As for trying to stop all of this, she points out in the claim that she did rebuff the harassing comments and made explicit requests to both Baldoni and Heath to stop. When their behavior persisted, she called for that all-hands meeting to address this. What is that if not pulling her weight behind her to stop the misconduct? She also says it was successful, so it really sounds like what many of you are insinuating is she's too powerful to have been harassed and abused like that. And that is such a naive way of looking at it, because power is always relevant depending upon the situation. As an actress, she has to defer to the director. When the director is also the producer and co-founder of the production company, when the director is there playing her leading man, it's not going to be easy for her to just halt production and get her way. As for Ryan Reynolds, it's also incredibly condescending to presume her husband would handle everything for her. Women who are harassed in the workplace vent, but don't necessarily expect their husbands to step up to their boss and give them an earful. If anything, this could hurt their standing and make them appear weaker or problematic to work with. We can't know how things went down privately in the Reynolds-Lively household, but if they're like most people, I bet she told him she was handling it and called him in for support when she came up with a game plan. That game plan, of course, being the all-hands meeting mentioned earlier. Third, she claims there was no intimacy coordinator on set, but also that she acted as the intimacy coordinator. Isn't that contradictory? There is no contradiction there. In context, it seems like she had to act as her own intimacy coordinator because one was not present. And that is a standard industry practice. So it is crazy to me that they had to request that in the list of 30 demands. That's why there was a demand made for one in her list. Also, she herself said it's not supposed to be like that. Fourth, why didn't she just quit? I hear this one very, very frequently. When Blake Lively called for the all hands meeting, it was after 2 major Hollywood strikes. The production on the movie had already been halted and delayed, and many people in the industry were already suffering from lack of work. In this context, I can see why she chose to resolve the issue with this agreement and move on with production. As the star of the film, she has a responsibility for the jobs and livelihoods of multiple people involved. For many women, we put up with misconduct because we need the work, the money, etc. And sometimes that's for us, but it may also be to support families, children. And I'm not saying Blake herself needed this job, but she may have recognized that there were others on staff who did. In the words of Justin Baldoni himself, we should stop asking women why they stay. And fifth, why didn't she say something sooner? I already touched on this briefly with how her actions would have cost everyone working on the whole production, but I also want to say yet again that she did actually say something during the production, not to the public, but to Sony, and that's why they had that all-hands meeting. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but perhaps it needs repeating. As for why she didn't say anything about the smear campaign, that itself would have been impossible. It's only been 4 months, and the smear campaign would have needed time to take root, time to be noticed, and time to gather evidence of. I think 4 months is actually pretty short when you take all of that into consideration. Finally, I want to emphasize that this is about the much larger issues this claim brings to light. I want to have this case open our eyes to the way the media and the general public scrutinizes women compared to men. Everyone was very quick to criticize Lively's behaviors and mannerisms, but now many seem very hesitant to question that narrative in order to take a closer look at Justin Baldoni. And it's okay if you bought into the campaign. It's totally fine. But now take a step back to acknowledge that rather than to become defensive. I also think this case is an opportunity to open up the unique issues facing women every day in the workplace and the compromises that they have to make. What complaints are written off until they absolutely must be dealt with? What complaints never get made because there's no big shot industry member to speak up? This alleged smear campaign reveals about how women who speak up against harassment are treated. I'm not only talking about the retaliation, but how so many members of the public would rather hold onto their criticism and equivocate a woman with an annoying personality with someone being accused of sexual harassment and an attempt to cover that up with documented details to support the claim. Perhaps this doesn't seem as obvious because it's in the context of a Hollywood celebrity, but just remember how often women who speak out against harassment and abuse at work are then stonewalled or quietly ostracized, made to feel left out until they simply quit, quote unquote, on their own. We all know that happens, and this is why we need to take these claims seriously. If you do want to believe that you reach your conclusions about Blake Lively all on your own, fine. Then it shouldn't hurt to assess the situation again to be sure of that. There's so much more that could be said, but I tried to keep this video as tight and focused as I could. If you would like to ask more questions or to open up a discussion, please feel free to leave a comment. Until next time, like, don't subscribe.